All right, everybody, here we are. So what we're looking at right now is cognitive bias, the cognitive bias index. So here we're looking at the brain, the Codex of 2016. What should we remember? Need to act fast, not enough meaning, too much information. So what we see here are a number of things that are in reference to our shortcuts in thinking. If we're going to be hunting a beast, we have to understand how that beast thinks, how that beast acts. What makes that beast that beast? What about that beast is unavoidable in its behavior? The beast, what strengths of that beast can be used as to find its weaknesses? This is how you defeat other human beings. This is how you win. Okay, so my vision isn't spectacular right now, but what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to pull this up. We're going to go part by part. So up here we have, what should we remember? Okay, we store memories differently based on how they were experienced. We reduce events and lists to their key elements. We discard specifics to form generalities. We edit and reinforce some memories after the fact. We favor simple looking options and complete information over complex, ambiguous options. To avoid mistakes, we're motivated to preserve our autonomy and status in a group and to avoid irreversible decisions. To get things done, we tend to complete things that we've invested time and energy in. So that's when we're dealing with what's going on now. Backfire effect, endowment effect, pseudo-certainty effect, unit bias, disposition effect, zero risk bias, generation effect, processing difficulty effect, IKEA effect, loss aversion, escalation of commitment, irrational escalation, sunk cost fallacy. Okay. That's how the Queensland authorities have fucked up, because they didn't understand that people understand that we tend to complete things that we've invested time and energy in. So to stay focused, we favor the immediate, relatable things in front of us. The need to act fast. To act, we must be confident we can make an impact and feel what we do is important. We project our current mindset and assumptions onto the past and the future. We think we know what other people are thinking. We simplify probabilities and numbers, making them easier to think about. We imagine things and people we're familiar with or fond of as being better than they are. So that's not enough meaning, right? So that's like halo effect, in-group bias, not invented here, cross-race effect, cheerleader effect, well-traveled road effect, out-group homogeneity bias, reactive devaluation, positive effect. Okay, so we fill in characteristics from stereotypes, generalities, and prior histories. Group attribution error, ultimate attribution error, stereotyping, essentialism, functional fixedness, moral credential effect, just world hypothesis, argument from fallacy, authority bias, automation bias, bandwagon effect, placebo effect. We find stories and patterns even in sparse data. Confabulation, clustering illusion, insensitivity to sample size, neglect of probability, anecdotal fallacy, illusion of validity, masked man fallacy, recency illusion, gambler's fallacy, hot hand fallacy, illusionary correlation, pareidolia, anthropomorphism. That's like when you're seeing a fucking cloud that looks like a dog, or a dog that looks like a cloud, or a cloud that looks like a person, or a fucking rock that looks like Mother Teresa. We notice flaws in others more easily. Bias, blind spot, naive cynicism, naive realism. We are drawn to details that confirm our own existing beliefs. Confirmation bias, congruence bias, post-purchase rationalization. So that's what's been happening here. Post-purchase rationalization is, and also like the sunk cost fallacy is what the police have, why they fucked themselves up so bad here. Okay, we're drawn to details that confirm our own existing beliefs. Observer expectancy effect. So because of the observer expectancy effect, when I wrote those, like the tours of duty, clandestine stuff and all that, I wrote that with the intention of getting people to try to copy my tactics and the, like, Thai military intelligence of revealing themselves to me like, ha ha, we used your tactics, motherfucker, ha ha. And that's what they did. Observer expectancy effect, because I tell them what I close the gap on the reflexive thinking loop of on observer expectancy. So you work out what the baseline is and you just keep on giving them the same thing that they expect, but you keep breadcrumbing them away. Okay? Expectation bias, ostrich effect. So like all of the good things that I've been doing around the world, they've been sticking their head in the sand and ignoring. And they're forgetting about continued influence effect. Okay? Continual influence effect is what JFK said. Doesn't matter what you say. If you say it for long enough, people are going to listen to you, and consistently enough, people are going to start listening to you. So too much information. We notice things already primed in memory or repeated often. Bizarre, funny, visually striking, anthropomorphic things stick out more than non-bizarre, unfunny things. We notice when something has changed. We are drawn to details that confirm our own existing beliefs. So bizarre, visually striking, anthropomorphic things stick out more than non-bizarre, unfunny things. Picture superiority effect, self-relevance effect, negativity bias, anchoring, conservatism, contrast effect, distinction bias, focusing. So, so you can see how I approach things, and you can see why I have problems with Australia, okay? Because, sorry, wrong. Sorry, that was wrong. I got to remove that from the stage. Remove that from the studio. Okay. So here, let's have a look. So anchoring. People are over-reliant on the first piece of information they hear. In a salary negotiation, whoever makes the first offer establishes a range of reasonable possibilities in each person's mind. Availability heuristic. People overestimate the importance of information that is available to them. A person might argue that smoking is not unhealthy because they know someone who lived to 100 and smoked 3 packs a day. That's my mum. Bandwagon effect. The probability of one person adopting a belief increases based on the number of people who hold that belief. This is a powerful form of groupthink and is a reason why meetings are often unproductive. So this is what's happening already. So the Labor Party approaches their policies without having anybody checking the rivets in the welds like this. It's not going to stand scrutiny because of blind spot bias. Failing to recognize your cognitive bias is a bias itself. People notice cognitive and motivational biases much more in others than in themselves. Okay. So in Australia, if you are educated in Australia, you are taught that that doesn't exist, that because of the Australian education system is superior to everybody else, that blind spot bias doesn't exist, and that suggesting that there's such thing as blind spots and that we can be ignorant is something to laugh at in the face. Like, yeah, Paul, oh yeah, they think the Labor Party didn't think something now, clearly, Paul, oh yeah, oh yeah, I'm so hilarious, oh yeah. Choice supportive bias. When you choose something, you tend to feel positive about it, even if that choice has flaws, like how you think your dog is awesome, even if it bites people every once in a while. So like my dog and like my girlfriends and stuff, right? Choice supportive bias. I think they're awesome and positive, even when they are real bad. So this is part of my personality that I fall for all the time, but we all fall for these things personally. Clustering illusion. This is a tendency to see patterns in random events. It is key to various gambling fallacies, like the idea that red is more or less likely to turn up on a roulette table after a string of reds. Confirmation. So that's why I got 4 in a row, because I've studied this bias. I got 4 on the poker machine in a row, the bets, boom, 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 and everyone's like, oh. Confirmation bias. We tend to listen only to information that confirms our preconceptions. One of the many reasons it's so hard to have an intelligent conversation about climate change or about Palestine. Conservatism bias, where people favor prior evidence over new evidence or information that has emerged. People were slow to accept that the earth was round because they maintained their earlier understanding that the planet was flat. So that's what's been going on here with me, because they created a conservatism baseline where you thought that I was the bad guy. Okay. Okay, we're going to proceed to the next slide. Okay. So we've seen the first ones, okay, down here, information bias. The tendency to seek information when it does not affect action. More information is not always better. With less information, people can often make more accurate predictions. Ostrich effect, the decision to ignore dangerous or negative information by burying one's head in the sand like an ostrich. Research suggests that investors check the value of their holdings significantly less often during bad markets. They don't want to see the bad shit. Outcome bias. Judging a decision based on the outcome rather than how exactly the decision was made in the moment. Just because you won a lot in Vegas doesn't mean gambling your money was a smart decision. Overconfidence. Some of us are too confident about our abilities, and this causes us to take greater risks in our daily life. Experts are more prone to this bias than lay people, since they are more convinced that they are right. The experts are always, oh, right, oh, I'm a fucking expert. Yeah, but you crashed your car and you're a cokehead, dude, and you're on fucking meth. But I'm an expert. They say that I'm an expert in the manager's court. Okay. Biases, anchoring. The tendency to be over-influenced by the earliest information presented to us when making decisions, thus allowing oneself to be driven to a decision or conclusion that is biased towards that initial piece of information, the anchor. So this is what we cannot be drawn into the anchoring because of the false equivalency that the Bondi shooting requires you to come up with something that everybody has not yet agreed on. Okay. Loss aversion. The tendency to strongly prefer decisions that allow us to avoid losses over those that allow us to acquire gains shows that the human perception of a loss is as much twice as powerful as that of an equal gain. So in Vietnam, we have this thing called Kung Trol Pham Dong, right? Kung Trol Pham Dong. It's like, it's about like the glory of being a troll against reactionaries, or against revolution. Like, so from my perspective, right, if you're like a left-wing revolutionary who's actually a reactionary that thinks they're revolutionary, with this Neil deGrasse Tyson stuff, we can come at you like third force shit and fuck you up so bad. And that's what I do. Endowment. The tendency to strongly prefer decisions that allow us to avoid losses over those that allow us to acquire gains show that the human perception of a loss is as much, twice as powerful as that of an equal gain. Endowment effect, the tendency to place greater value on a good that we own than that which we place on an identical good that we do not own. Framing effect, the tendency to react, judge, or interpret the exact same information in distinctly different ways, depending on how it is presented to us or framed. Confirmation bias, the tendency to overweight, seek out, or more readily recall information in a way that confirms our preconceived beliefs, while simultaneously undervaluing or ignoring information that disproves our preconceived beliefs. Hindsight bias, inclination after event has occurred to see the event as having been predictable, even if there had been little to no objective basis for predicting it. However, I've been able to prove anomalies in that situation with myself. Okay. Availability heuristic, a common mental shortcut that causes individuals to rely on immediate information or examples that come to mind first when evaluating a specific topic, concept, method, or decision. Sunk cost fallacy, the tendency to irrationally include sunk costs that have already been incurred and are irrecoverable as a factor in our forward decision making. Gambler's fallacy, the tendency to believe that if something happens more frequently than normal during a period of time, it must happen less frequently in the future, or vice versa. Hot hand fallacy, the mistaken belief that an individual who has experienced success with a random event has a greater chance of continuing that success in subsequent attempts. I've been able to prove that as well, that I can do it. Money illusion, the tendency to think of currency in nominal terms rather than in real terms. Consider only nominal value instead of real purchasing power. So that's what the police, they have money illusion because of their institution. So they tend to think of currency only in nominal terms rather than real terms, considering its actual value and what it does and where it comes from and all these different types of things from an institutional perspective. That's probably why you overspent a whole bunch with me. Okay, cognitive biases. While making judgments and decisions about the world around us, we like to think that we are objective, logical, and capable of taking in and evaluating all the information that is available to us. The reality is that our judgments and decisions are often riddled with errors and influenced by a wide variety of biases. The human brain is both remarkable and powerful, but certainly subject to limitations. One type of fundamental limitation on human thinking is known as a cognitive bias. A cognitive bias is a type of error in thinking that occurs when people are processing and interpreting information in the world around them. Cognitive biases are often a result of our attempt to simplify information processing. So that's what I mean. So in Australia, everything is about simplification of information processing. And so, okay, we have encyclopedias, and then we started to categorize jobs and things, and then we started to document them and categorize them, and we started to create an encyclopedia. And an encyclopedia was as fundamentally influential to human beings as the internet, right? The encyclopedia. So with the encyclopedia, we started to categorize things. But with Australia, everything is in abbreviated English, even compared to American English. Everything is in abbreviated English. Everything is about a mental shortcut, doing everything in a basic way. Okay, so we're going to go over this. So these are all the things that our government takes for granted. I taught them this during the last state elections, and then since then they've been using this to win elections, and then have been lying to you about who taught them this. Suggestibility, a form of misattribution where ideas suggested by a questioner are mistaken for memory. So the reminiscence bump, the effect that people tend to recall more personal events from adolescence and early childhood than from other lifetime periods. Okay. Cryptomnesia, false memory, a form of misattribution where a memory is mistaken for imagination or the confusion of true memories with false memories. Consistency bias, incorrectly remembering one's past attitudes and behaviors as resembling present attitudes and behaviors. Rosy retrospection, the tendency to rate past events more positively than they had actually been when the events had occurred. Self-serving bias, perceiving oneself responsible for desirable outcomes but not responsible for undesirable ones. Egocentric bias, recalling the past in a self-serving manner. Example, remembering one's exam grades as being better than they were, or remembering a caught fish as being bigger than it was. Hindsight bias, filtering memory of past events through present knowledge so that those events look more predictable than they actually were. Also known as the "I knew it all along" bias. I knew something was up all the time. Nancy Drew told me. Hyperbolic discounting, the tendency for people to have a stronger preference for more immediate payoffs relative to later payoffs, where the tendencies increases the closer to the present both payoffs are. Irrational escalation, the tendency to make irrational decisions based upon rational decisions in the past or to justified actions already taken. Omission bias, the tendency to judge harmful actions as worse or less moral than equally harmful inactions. Mere exposure effect, the tendency for people to express undue liking for things merely because they are familiar with them. Negativity bias, phenomenon which has when people are spending more time and attention on the weight of the negative experience. Interloper effect, consolation paradox, a tendency to value third-party consolations as objective, confirming, and without motive. Also, consolation paradox, the conclusion that solutions proposed by existing personnel within an organization are less likely to receive support than from those recruited for that purpose. Normalcy bias, the refusal to plan for or react to disaster which has never happened before. That's what got the ALP into the Bondi shooting, because I told you in July, early July, that something was coming. Neglect of probability, the tendency to completely disregard probability when making a decision under uncertainty. That's what they do all the time here in Australia, neglect of probability. So if you know they're going to do the neglect of probability, and then you come up with your own sum, your own math, which is cutting them off at the pass, and they're gonna eat at you, eat from your hand. Focusing effect, prediction bias is occurring when people place too much importance on one aspect of an event, causes error in accurately predicting the utility of a future outcome. Illusion of control, the tendency for human beings to believe they can control or at least influence outcomes that they clearly cannot. Outcome bias, the tendency to judge a decision by its eventual outcome instead of based on the quality of the decision at the time that it was made. Post-purchase rationalization, the tendency to persuade oneself through rational argument that it was a purchase that was of good value. Framing, okay? Framing effect, drawing different conclusions based on how data is presented. Presenter or expectation bias, the tendency for experimenters to believe, certify, and publish data that agree with their expectations for the outcome of an experiment, and to disbelieve, discard, or downgrade the corresponding weightings for data that appear to conflict with those expectations. Information bias, the tendency to seek information even when it cannot affect action. Extraordinarity bias, the tendency to value an object more than others in the same category as a result of of the extraordinarity of that object that does not in itself change the value. Okay, these are all things that we deal with every day as humans, and these are like, okay, if you work at the pest controller, you need to know how to catch a rat. Confirmation bias, the tendency to search for or interpret information in a way that confirms one's preconceptions. Choice supportive bias, the tendency to remember one's choices are better than they actually were. Endowment effect, loss aversion, the fact that people often demand much more to give up an object than they would be willing to pay to acquire it. Congruence bias, a tendency to test, hypothesize exclusively through direct testing, in contrast to tests of possible alternative hypotheses. Distinction bias, tendency to view options as more dissimilar when evaluating them simultaneously than when evaluating them separately. Contrast effect, the enhancement or diminishing of a weight or other measurement when compared with a recently observed contrasting object. The enhancement or diminishing of a weight or other measurement when compared with a recent observed contrasting effect. So like, yeah, she used to be skinny before, but now she's fat, or she's all that type of shit, right? Or he's fat, right? Bandwagon effect, the tendency to do or believe things because many other people do or believe the same, related to groupthink and herd behavior. Denomination effect, the tendency to spend more money when it is denominated in small amounts rather than large amounts. Okay, so as I said, okay, we're out there hunting men. We're hunting men and women. The good news is, if we're hunting men and women, this works in every culture. Every news media story that you're told, the people that are educated are using every one of these. They're going to these things and they're coming up with ideas of how to sell a lie to you in a way which will confirm with the lies that they're being told how to sell to you by Canberra or by fucking Moscow or by Washington. This is how you catch the rat. This is how you catch the rat. This is how you beat any human. This is how you beat every human. I've been so deeply invested in this. Once I became a teacher, I became deeply invested in cognitive biases because of Neil deGrasse Tyson, and then causation because of Marianne Talbot. And so my advice, so I'm going to say this, okay? The anti-Islamic stuff that I got in trouble for saying when I had cancer in my face, right? What I said in the podcast isn't what the police, Stephen Potter, dictated and put on paper. That then you came after me and said, whoever wrote all that stuff on that bold print on that piece of paper, that transcribed stuff, they amalgamated things that I said into sentences, paragraphs, and into an overall piece of writing, which was not what I had actually said. So if you want to know who said the deeply racist stuff and framed it and put it together in that way for prosecution, that's a person that's guilty of saying all that stuff. I didn't say anything against Muslim people on my show, and I didn't say the discriminatory word against Muslims, but what is it? Somebody, Thomas Braselic, got on my show and did, and then he got banned from the show. So this is why they got me studying business, and they got me studying criminology, right? Because, and this is why they say that I always win, because this is how I hunt.